Hi, David. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. You're busy in those days, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Very busy. Yeah. But yeah, it's good to be here.
Thanks. Thanks. Our pleasure.
Yeah. Are you still waiting for Jim?
Yeah. I had a conversation with him today. He's joining now in
Cool.
1, 2, 3 minutes.
Awesome.
So I'm going to welcome everybody and then invite you to present the Blue Metropolis as you want. And then we will be having a conversation with Jim.
Yes.
And at the list, maybe we will give the audience opportunity to ask question if they would like.
Okay, that's wonderful. Just so you know, after I speak on behalf of MedBlue, I'll have to go because I have other things that I have to.
Sure. No problem, sure.
That's good.
Yeah.
Are you still planning to send us the video like you did last time?
Yes, sure. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd love to include it with the rest of the programming online.
Absolutely, so yes, I will send it to you. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
You are welcome. I'm muting myself. I just have to call someone here.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Hey, Claudia, how are you? Sorry, I was on the phone. Claudia. Sorel, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm really sorry that I'm late. I'm really sorry.
It's fine.
You're not late, Sorel.
You are not late.
You're early.
You're in time.
I'm early. I've never been early in my life.
Good morning.
Hello, Anwar.
Arwa, sabah al-khair. How are you? Jim is joining us. Here is.
He's in New York, I guess, right?
Yeah. He's having fun with the lake. Hey, Jim, good morning.
Okay. Hi, Jim.
He cannot.
You're muted, honey.
Jimmy, we cannot hear you.
Now?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. It takes me a while. I'm not good at this.
You look good.
How are you?
Good. Yeah. Exciting to watch you both.
Thank
See you both.
I know we haven't been in touch in a long time.
That's right.
Okay, Anwar said I have to put away my cigar for this, right? So I just do it. But I got to put on my glasses to see who's here.
Okay.
I have a new look too.
What?
A new look too. You have a new look too.
I got my first haircut since the pandemic. I went into a mall and I said, all that I want is that my hair somehow ends up in the shape of my face. They couldn't touch the beard because of the masks. This is New York, right? Anyway,
yes, of course, yeah.
So I sit in the chair and she says, it's too long. It wasn't as long as Anwar's. I'm jealous, but
no,
wow.
I said, well, just make it all look kind of so it fits. She said, sure. She lifted it up, took out a scissor, chopped it off, and said, that'll be $15. I said, I could have done that. I said, I could have done that myself. I said, and she says, yeah, but you're going to give me a tip too.
Hey, Sammy, hi.
He's connecting to the audio.
Okay.
So this is sponsored by Blue
Met.
I don't know.
We have David with us already.
Hi, I'm here from Blue Met.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, David.
Hi.
Hi, David.
Well, hello to all.
We are not yet in time, but we are 10, so hopefully yeah, it's a good start.
It's a good start for sure.
Yeah.
Jim, you look great. You really look relaxed. You've got a suntan. You look healthy.
I could put my hands in the earth again. I planted some nasturtiums and basil this morning. What else could you ask for? Thank you. But no, I feel good. I lost
Hi,
40.
Jim. Hi,
Yeah,
Jim.
it shows.
Sammy.
Yes. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You look good.
So
Good.
do you.
Yeah.
How are you, Sami? كيف حالك؟
أهلا أنور. أهلا.
بخير. رمضان كريم.
رمضان كريم. Hi.
So Claudia, you folks didn't go to Mexico this year, I take it. You're muted.
Claudia, you're muted.
I'm mute.
We're still hoping to go in July as soon as we get our second shot. And then we'll feel that we can do anything, right? All of us.
That's right. I got my second shot a few weeks ago, and then I waited. Then I got a COVID test so I could come up to Montreal, because since the pandemic, nobody fixed my teeth and I didn't get my eyes checked. So I managed to do all that, pick up a smoked meat sandwich from Lester's, my mail, and some good Indian takeout, and come back.
Wow, very good. That was fast.
Hey, Francoise, let's see you.
Hey, Aviva, how are you?
Well,
I'm good, thank you. How are you? How's the family? Everyone well?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
Hi, Sorrel.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Good.
Jim, it says Francoise. It should say Francis.
who says Francois? The nerve, huh?
Underneath you, it says Francois.
It does. Well,
Hi, Big Jim.
Say Francis. Hello, Sammy.
Hi, Big
How are
Jim.
you doing? Great
How
to
are
see
you?
you. I'm doing
Good.
great. Yeah,
Oh,
when
no,
we
it's
get
not
together,
you.
it's always for Dr. Jim. And Anwar.
Wow.
There is Dr. Jim and there is Big Jim.
Yes.
I can tell that story.
Yeah.
How Jim, how I introduced Big Jim as Big Jim in Arabic, Kabir, which also means important. So that
Jim
they
al
would,
Kabir.
so they would treat him with dignity at his Bedouin estate in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And Jim
And dressed me up. I was so honored that dressing up in fancy garb and so on, and eating goats. And I said to myself, I said, why are they doing this for me instead of Jim? And Jim said, I did it last year.
Oh, okay, good. We'll see you later.
Well, the last part of it is that all the men, we never saw a woman the whole evening, right?
No.
We go into the kitchen where there's a huge platter of rice with pieces of goat meat, and in the middle of it is the goat's head, and on top of the head is the goat's tail, which is an acquired delicacy, but reserved for the guest of honor.
Yeah. So had Sammy been there, I would have said, Sammy, what do I do? But someone else was there who was the head of the International Red Cross. and he ate it with relish. So I ate it
I think
other relish. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are already 2 minutes after 12:30. I think it's maybe we wait 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then start.
Sounds good. Yep.
Yeah, to give people maybe opportunity to join us. Sorry, Jimmy, big Jimmy, to interrupt you.
Yeah. So, Anwar, pretty fancy, the Montreal Literary Festival, Blue Metropolis.
Yeah, it's actually it's the Blue Met. I will speak about our partnership, but we are lucky really to do this event with partnership with the Blue Met and represented by David here. So I think it's, I'm happy to be one of the players there. And it's a good combination.
We're happy to have you. Yeah. Looking forward to saying a few words about that.
It's not everybody who gets to hear Jim Torczyner speaking about people's rights.
Yes.
Careful on this. I'll speak about you also.
No, don't speak about me. I just get in trouble. But and having Dr. Sammy there as well.
Yeah.
And I think another doctor should be there. Amal is.
Amal, where is Amal?
It's a conflict of interest. One of us, we cannot be together, even at home, conferences, events.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Just one of us. No, she's outside, so she couldn't really join us. I think we can start.
Okay. Do you want to mute everyone that's not going to be talking, just to prevent?
Absolutely, yes. Let me see. Okay, this is, I have to figure out how I can.
I think if you click on the three, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arwa, for being here. So I would like to welcome everybody here today in our event. It's really delighted to have all of you and to host our professor, first of all, my friend, Jim Torczyner. And my name is Anwar Alhjooj. I work at Montreal City Mission. Today in our program, we will be hosting one of the legend community organizers, not just only in Montreal, but also in the Middle East. But before I would like to invite David Bradford to present the Blue Met Festival. This is our 6th event together, partnership between Montreal City Mission and the Blue Met. We started in 2016 with the first event giving the newcomers and the refugee the stage to present their strength. Because usually when we hear the word refugee, we think just all the time of the weakness of the people, that they really need help. They need to be sustained. And with the partnership with the Blue Metropolis, we give them this platform to present their strength instead of their weakness. And I think it's an amazing partnership between a literary festival and community organizing to organize an event like that. It's an amazing, and it's demonstrate the diversity, the good work that all communities do here in Montreal. David, he is the Associate Coordinator, Programming and Communication at the Blue Metropolis in Montreal International Festival. David, the screen yours. Please.
Thanks, Anwar. It's good to be here again. This is actually, I think, the second event that I've been working with Anwar on for the 2020-2021 festival season. in the lead up to the programming that we have that's ending today, started on April 24th, but through to May 2nd today, and all of which will be available online later on, including this particular event in a couple of weeks. So it's great to be here, and really I think Anwar hammers home some of the things that are so important about this partnership for us at Blue Metropolis. I think it's in a small but very impactful way, this is a really great way to allow these communities to control the message about themselves, to kind of reclaim their words and kind of articulate how they feel about it, what their experience has been, and the strength, as you said, that goes into making it here. So super happy to be here, and looking forward to future events with Montreal City Mission. Thank you. Enjoy the show.
Thank you, David. So we will be starting our program, but before, I think we will be giving Jim as much as he needs to speak, to explain, and then we will leave the opportunity for everybody here to ask questions, and maybe we'll have a small conversation. But I have to say, I think also you can see it and feel it. It's emotional for me to speak about Jim, personally and professionally. Personally, I know him from long time ago, 1996, 97. Professionally, I was his student at McGill University. So it's a not easy, in the positive way, Jim, moment for me. However, Jim Torczyner is a professor of social work at McGill University. He is the founder of the McGill Middle East program in civil society and peace building, and then renamed ICANN McGill. In 1997, Jim founded Montreal Project Genesis, a community-based grassroots organization. Professor Torczyner founded the McGill Middle East program in civil society and peace building in 1997 to promote the interrelated objectives of social justice within countries and peace among them. And we will hear soon about this in his book. I'm going to ask Jim just a few, maybe 2-3 questions, leading questions, and then we will ask questions if we would like. I would like to begin with the personal question, personal issue, emotional issue, I would say. To like to start from asking you, Jim, a personal. What is that brought you to choose this path and career, and mainly focusing in human rights and empowerment? Why you choose to be a community organizers, to fight everybody, to try to change difficult things, and you change. I would also connect your work after to what we are doing now in Montreal City Mission. Please, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Anwar. Why do good people cause trouble to change bad situations? Could be the question. That starts, before that, let me correct a few things. I grew up in New York City as the child of Holocaust survivors in a Jewish, Black, Cuban, Irish, Puerto Rican neighborhood. And at a time in New York where there was a lively form of coexistence, sometimes we fought over our coexistence between the various groups. And we grew up mainly on the streets. And most of what I saw around me were a variety of cultures and a variety of inequality and unfairness, which you saw from one block, one street to another in New York City. But the main thing that motivated me throughout my life has been the message of being a child of Holocaust survivors. My father was a political organizer, and he early was sent to Dachau and then to Buchenwald. My mother, who grew up in a poor family, but knew who she was. Dressed up as a nun and walked into Dachau with false papers and said to the guards, "This man's not Jewish," and walked out with my father. And my mother taught me never again, not to anybody at all. And if you see it, do something about it. You have to do something about it. It's not just an intellectual choice, but it's a way that each one of us express who we are in the world and how we'd like the world to be. That moved me. I never cared much about school. I was a terrible student. I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I was involved in civil rights movement and protests, being beaten, getting jailed. I worked in Spanish Harlem with street gangs, and then moved to Jerusalem in 1969, where I worked with street gangs that became the Israeli Black Panther movement, a nonviolent movement demanding equal rights for the minority populations in Israel. And it became an enormous enterprise, not through my work, the work of my mentor who recently passed away, Avner Amiel, and so many other people. And it rocked the country. It put social justice on the agenda. At which point I decided I really needed an education. I mean, I had honestly a 1.8 average out of 4 with a bachelor's degree in Hebrew literature, because the longer I was in school, the longer my deferment from Vietnam, and the poorer you did, the longer it took you to graduate. Anyway, at that point, I figured I needed to get an education. I was fighting for things that I didn't completely understand. So I wrote a book, I wrapped it in my transcript, sent it to Berkeley, only place with a note, "Don't judge a book by its cover. I want a PhD." They took me, and I loved it. And I want to go right back to Israel to do the kind of things that I eventually did. But my mother died suddenly and young. My father was sick. My son was 4 years old. So I looked for an academic job. And I arrived in Montreal, and McGill offered me a job. And I said, "You got to believe in what it is that I do, because I can't just teach it, I do it. And if you can't support that, you really shouldn't hire me." And McGill said, "Okay." That's how I arrived in Montreal. And from there, right in the beginning, I started door knocking in Côte-de-Neige with some of my students. I wanted to see if it was possible to bridge the diversity within Montreal around common issues: English, French, Jewish, Catholic, the various multiple ethnicities that seem to live in separate solitudes. And I chose Côte-de-Neige. And in my door knocking, and this will explain how the whole idea of a storefront came about. It didn't come about because I had a PhD in Berkeley. It came about because what I saw and learned from the people themselves. So I was door knocking one day on Victoria Avenue in a basement apartment. And I'd knocked on that door a few times before without success. And this time, this man let me in. And his entire apartment was painted in black. The floors, the doors, the windows were heavily shaded. There's maybe one dim light bulb in the apartment. And I looked at his eyes and I understood right away. And I looked at his arm and I saw the numbered tattoo from a concentration camp. And he didn't speak English or Hebrew. He spoke Polish and Yiddish, and I spoke neither. But you could look at his eyes and as I could at my father's eyes at times. So I wrote my phone number. We didn't have an office. And I put it in his hands. And I went like this, that he could call me. And 3 weeks later, the police did. And they asked me, do I know him? And I explained. And they said, well, I said, what's the story? They said, well, we find him in the middle of the night every once in a while, shouting, screaming, as if he's mad. And I said, what do you do? I said, well, we pick him up and we take him to the station or the hospital. And then what? Well, then we let him out. And then what? Well, a month later, we pick him up again. So I went back to visit him with David Rome. Some of you may remember him. He was the historian and archivist at the Canadian Jewish Congress who spoke both Polish and Yiddish. And we went over and he explained to me through David's translation that he had been in Treblinka and he was told the day in which he was going to be executed. And his bunkmates showed remarkable courage and they hollowed out a place where they could hide him during the day, where he stood for 12 hours a day at least, not being able to eat, talk, go to the bathroom, move, and at night they let him out. Somehow, this man ended up on Victoria Avenue within walking distance of synagogues, of social services. No one knew his pain. And I think he wasn't mad. He was out in the street at the middle of the night, hoping someone or somewhere will hear him. And someone did. Around that, a short while later, a neighbor woman came down, knocked on the door. A Black woman in her 50s, and gave him some clothes to mend. And I looked at him, and you could see in his eyes a little bit of life. And she gave him $1. And I went up to see her and I said, do you speak Polish? And she said, no, I don't have to. I can look in that man's eyes and know he's alone. Everybody has a right to feel he's a part of something. I rip up those clothes and then I gave him $1 to fix it. I said, why? Because we're all part of the same thing. She taught me what Project Genesis became in Montreal, in Israel, in Palestine, and in Jordan, that we have the capacity and the obligation to give back and to help each other, to advocate for our rights. Why did no one know his pain? Because our services have become too distant from the people who need them. Decisions are made by people who don't interact with them. Policies are drawn up that reflect the interests of more powerful people that don't reflect the concerns of the poor. Our communities have changed. So the idea that we can create organizations of citizens that will advocate for each other, that will organize to change conditions, and that they will own, it will be their organization, was born out of those door-knocking experiences. That's what Project Genesis became and still is. I haven't been involved in decades because about 25 years ago, I brought that model first to Israel, then Jordan and Palestine. But Anwar, am I talking too much?
No, you are talking fantastic and everybody is listening. I think
it's hard with this kind of format.
Yeah, when you speak about to come together, how people can come together where they have fear, where they have poverty, where they have, as you mentioned, let's say take the new families that they are coming here to Quebec, and we know about the challenging of the French language. How people can come together while they don't either speak or English? while let's say the religious conflict, not religious conflict between religious, but between people, between political agenda, what you would do for that?
Well, there are a lot of issues in that. You said it earlier. People have strengths, and part of what you're doing today is presenting those strengths. We don't need to look at people because they're vulnerable as victims. We need to look at people as having the capacity, lacking the knowledge, lacking the connections, but having the capacity and the responsibility and wanting to take conditions into their own hands. And we, being privileged, have an obligation to share our knowledge and our expertise, not just in a classroom, but in the real lives of people. The way Jasmine Williams, the person who gave that Holocaust survivor the clothes to mend, she understood that. She did that. She was a Canadian living there for a long time. She had skills. They didn't share a language. One of those skills is to let people know you belong. You're part of us.
Great, because this has bring me to jump to your book that we want to hear from you more and more. So you are focusing in your 25 years of building partnership between academia and communities. And the story is also about people and the capacity to transform society by uniting them around the three core values, which is universality, reciprocity, and inclusion, and doing so across border in a conflicted zone and with a deep ethnic, religious, and economic divides. What are the main ideas in your story? Why you wrote this book now?
Well, if I don't write it now, I'll never write it. I'm getting old. But there are a lot of good questions here. I lived in Israel for 4 years and feel very connected to the Middle East as a whole, not just the Israeli side and my Jewish identity, but also my social justice side, which reaches out equally to the Palestinian and Jordanian identities too. But the best organizing takes place without a blueprint. I didn't have a blueprint in starting Project Genesis. It evolved. When and the Montreal Federation is the main funder of Project Genesis. And in the early 90s, they asked me if I could try and bring the model to a city with which they were twin, Beersheba in Israel. And I wanted to do that, and I did. And I brought it to Israel and understood there were the very same issues that one experienced in Montreal. And the issue was connecting a community that consisted of immigrants from across the globe, a native Israeli population, a native Palestinian population, living to a larger degree in poverty than in most places in Israel. How could they be connected within a political system that wanted to keep it that way? That's a complicated situation that I explain in the book, which are the politics of Project Renewal and how responsibility for social services have been have been downsized from the responsibility of the state to either privatized to profit-making institutions or diasporatized, asking Jewish communities in the diaspora to fund services in Israel because of the deep economic issues, problems that Israel was having that they faced the same way we do in Canada by putting the burden of that on the poorest people. I'm not sure if that came across well. I think I got too many ideas rolled up in that. But I took a group of students door to door in Beersheba and understood if you want to make change, it has to be a national organization. And we started in Jerusalem as well. Same model, found the same kind of issues. And with Ben Gurion University in partnership, we created at first an organization in Israel that for the next 20 years advocated for tens of thousands of people each year, created major changes in legislation and social policy that affected hundreds of thousands of people. And as I was there and that was developing, and I was very committed to that, things were changing between Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. And I said to myself, well, if I really believe in this message, 3 principles, we all share the same rights. One of those rights is that we have the right to be in reciprocal relationships in our families, with our communities, with our institutions, with our political leaders. And lastly, inclusion. Those who can't exercise their rights on their own, we have a societal responsibility to include them in such a way that they can. So that's what this organizing is all about. And I wanted to share that in Jordan and in Palestine. Except I had never been to an Arab country. I hadn't traveled in the West Bank or Gaza because I've always been opposed to the occupation, and I don't feel that you go into someone's home without an invitation. Nobody invited me, and there was no reason why they should. So I figured I'd start in Jordan because there was a peace treaty already, or was coming into being, and the border was now open. And I started to go over, and it was thanks to Bernard Shapiro, then the principal of McGill, and Greta Chambers, the late chancellor of McGill, who opened some doors for me there. And I began to meet with the University of Jordan, talk about this idea, community groups, and discovered that there was no profession of social work in Jordan. There was no academic discipline. So we came up with an idea. How about if they send over some of their professors and we will help them get a master's in social work, they already had PhDs, and develop a curriculum and a program for social work in Jordan, as well as a center similar to the ones that we have, that we developed in Israel. So this is how the fellowship program began. They were very interested in that, and I said, good, but I'm also interested in the peace building part of it, and I understand the reluctance. But how about if in parallel, we'll have some Israelis in the program, in this fellowship program as well. No pressure, but I kind of feel if people share the same values and share an office and are in a program together, leave them alone, they'll work it out. And they did. Who was in the program? Well, Anwar, someone you know very well, who became very famous, which is Amal al-Sana, as well as a Noga Porat, a kibbutznik, a socialist, religious kibbutznik, And Meirav Moshe, who was originally from the States, who lived in Israel for a long time, helped build the organization in Beersheba, and what now is doing a PhD, and 2 Jordanians, both older, more conservative, religious, and they're in this program together. And this is how it began to take off. And in the meantime, I begin to make trips to Palestine and say, we ought to be able to put this together as one program. We share these same values. We can find ways to negotiate it so we don't compromise anybody. But if we all are interested, if we believe that peace between countries also depends on developing social peace within countries, and we want to develop the same ideology, how about a regional ideology that we all share the same rights, no matter who we are, no matter which country we're in, no matter what our status is. Let's work for that. And we created a board from the 3 countries, and we developed this program. And through this program, it's a 25-year experience. I could go on, but we developed 11 centers that advocated for well over 100,000 people a year, altogether over 1 million people. Many of them through partnerships with universities. And let me speak about those, for example. And Alhjooj University. Never been to Nablus. It's in Nablus, which is in the heartland of Palestine, the commercial center, an important cultural center, and Alhjooj University is the mainstay of that area. And I went to meet first the vice president, Rami Hamdallah, who later became the prime minister of Palestine. And I had all kinds of misgivings. I had heard about violence and what do I do and how would I get there? How would I get out of there? And, you know, is it safe and all that? My preconceptions, which were challenged once I got there, and I saw what it was. And you know what? It reminded me very much so of what Israeli campuses looked like 30 years before. Young students interested in living their lives, creating their own country. Yes, concerned about the other, but that's not the main concern. The main concern were becoming the architects, the social workers, the lawyers, the poets, the doctors, the engineers, to build a society of their own. And yes, there were monuments for the martyrs who fell during the Intifada. That came later, but that I saw. Just like they were on Israeli campuses for soldiers who fell during the various wars. I didn't see difference. I was no longer afraid. I felt very comfortable. I got it. I understood it. And when I was in Rami's office, and we wanted to expand the program to include, so we would have cohorts of Palestinians, Israelis, and Jordanians together. Altogether, we graduated close to 70. Rami Hamdallah says, I got just a person for you. And he picks up the phone, and who does he call? Sammy. So let me tell you a bit about Sammy that I got to know over many years. Sammy was then teaching at Alhjooj. Sammy was a national Palestinian poet and a well-known organizer. He spent 5 years in Israeli prisons during the first Intifada because his poetry was considered insightful, not a violent man, never preached violence. And he wrote some very good poems in prison. and wrote newspaper columns. And when he got out, he became one of the main proponents of nonviolent action, social change, organized writers' associations between Palestinians and Israelis. He himself wrote joint Sesame Street scripts for Israeli and Palestinian Sesame Street. When do you get to hear about this? A Palestinian child and an Israeli child meet at the intersection. They don't speak the same language. One is holding an onion, the other is holding a soccer ball. They both understand they don't like onions. They both understand they like soccer balls, and the relationship starts. And Sammy had a vision of social justice. It's never the person who initiates the idea who's responsible for what happens after. It's being able to find people like Sammy, like Amal, like Meirav along the way. They transform it into reality. And Sammy did, along with many others. And in Jordan, where Talal al-Qida, who came from not a prosperous family in the city of Salt. Salt was when Abdullah I came to Jordan. He wanted to have his capital there, but the Sultanians said no, and then he moved to Amman. Talal had experience as a community organizer. He had to support his family from a very young age. He went to the University of Baghdad to study social work. And one day, an Iraqi officer came into the classroom, took all the men, no matter where they were from, and said, "You're in the army now." And Talal was drafted. He is the least aggressive person I know. But he helped support his family by writing letters, love letters home to fellow soldiers, girlfriends and wives and stuff like that. And Talal joined the program and other people like that. They built centers in the heart of low-income communities that have done incredible things. Let me give you a few examples. In Nablus, there are homes there that are 800 years old. Nablus was destroyed by an earthquake in 1927. And parts were rebuilt, parts were kind of fixed up. Parts were destroyed by a military occupation and by war. And the people who lived in these crumbling homes were the poorest of the poor. Now, what Sammy did, which is incredible, is he tapped into the university as a whole that had a policy that every single student must do community service. And Sammy set up an organization, our center there, that trained thousands of students each year to work at hundreds of organizations and instill that idea of service. So here's what some of them did. They went to the homes of the poorest of the poor and redesigned their homes for them without their having to move. Homes that didn't have floors, didn't have bathrooms, didn't have kitchens, that had mold, gaping holes in the ceilings, or that had disabled teenagers in there in wheelchairs, but there were no way for them to get to the street because there were no ramps. These students, under the center's direction, not only designed these homes, but they then went and they schnorred. How do you say schnorr in Arabic? That they kind of bargained for the cost of the material and got it at cost price. And then with their own hands, they have rebuilt 600 homes over the course of the years at an average cost of $750. But more than that, what they did is they showed up at the homes of the most isolated and said, you know why we're here? Because of Jasmine Williams in Montreal. She taught us through this Professor Jim that we got to give back. And here we are. You're important to us. And what they did and what Sammy inspired is, how do you answer Anwar's question? How do you create a social fabric among people who feel alienated, who feel totally disconnected? That's how you do it. You show up. You show up with your best intentions from the heart because you know it. You know you can do it. What the organization does is to create the context, the forum in which it can be done. In Jordan, for example, Talal, who became the director of the center, and they opened up a storefront. And one day this woman comes into the storefront, and I've described all these events in the book. And she's very upset. She's a single mother with 4 kids and broke. And in Jordan, everyone has a family book which lists the names of all the people in your family. It's like an identity card. So Talal asked to see it. And he saw that there were 5 children in the book, but the woman was only talking about 4. So Talal asked, and she said, well, when I was in a hospital giving birth to the 5th child, my husband came in, the 5th child was a boy, divorced me, and said he was taking the child to Syria. And that was 2 years ago. And she had no word from her son or from her former husband. But Talal knew how the system works. And he knew that you cannot take a child across a border without the permission of both parents. And he called the border. And he found out, yeah, the father crossed, but the baby didn't. And then he started working on it, figuring it out. Well, the child must be somewhere. So it must be in an orphanage. He started calling the orphanages. And 2 weeks later, he found the child in an orphanage within 1 mile of where the mother was living. Imagine that. Now, a few months later, there was a lot of anger in Jordan, and people in this neighborhood stoned every public building except one, our center. Actually, they protected it. Why? Because they knew it belonged to them. This wasn't charity. We're in it together. One other example from Jordan. We go door knocking. That's what it's about. You don't wait for people to come to you, you go to them. So Talal and Rod Al-Hadid, who also was a fellow and worked at the center, they discovered a lot of elderly women who used to live in the villages, but now are in the city, who said they were blind. So they organized from the university to bring doctors to the center, and that they would bring the women in for eye tests, and they did. And what they discovered, these women weren't blind, but they definitely needed glasses. And not only that, they did some tests, but they found that they had very high levels of blood sugar levels, which relate to diabetes, which could exacerbate bad eyesight. So Talal and Rod, and at the time Salah Al-Lawzi passed away, got a optician to make glasses for him and donate them for free. These women could now see, there are about 7 or 8 of them. But because Talal did it in an empowering way, when he came over one day, he said, I bet you're happy. And they said, no, we're not. So what if we can see? We don't know how to read. So Talal said, I'll make you a deal. We'll give you free reading lessons on one condition. That once a week you come to the center and you don't eat for 14 hours before. And we'll take your blood, a little drop of your blood, and then we'll give you a free big breakfast afterwards. Why? Because we want to tell you about blood sugar and diet and make sure you're okay. The deal was done. They graduated a literacy class. When they graduated, the president of the University of Jordan came down and handed out the diplomas. They put them up on their walls. They're proud. They're so proud. They came back to Talal and they said, so what if we can read? We don't have work. And Talal said, you're right. And they put together not only some enterprises, but these women organized the first Golden Age Club in Jordan for seniors who needed to have their blood sugar levels tested, who also needed to learn how to read and these other things. And the mayor invited them to City Hall to meet them. And they went and they gave them a piece of their mind, as they should, about what needs to be fixed. That's the magic of what this work is about. That's where the power of it comes from.
I have to say that I visited some centers in the Middle East, and really it's amazing. And the results too, where brings people from diverse background, but also, as you mentioned, Jim, before, if they have a common issues, they can come together and really do changes. I want to go a little bit back from what you said about creating those centers and the activities in the Middle East, and to try to compare between your work here in Montreal, where there, tolerance, openness, that you can work with different communities, and the work that you did in the Middle East, with all the challenges there, with the conflict. You are white, you are Jewish, you are coming from the North America, and still you succeed and did amazing work. What's the combination? Why Sami agreed to work with you? Why Amal, the Bedouin women from the Negev, agreed? The Ashkenazi Amit, and all those, different people from different background, they came together and they worked together and they did things together. However, when they are here in Montreal, they share the same room. When they go back, they cannot even meet.
Well, I think one, it's a combination of self-interest. There is a reason to join this program. This is not let's all have dinner together once a month and talk about stuff. Let's change the world. We need that. Our communities need that. We're coming to Canada to get better at doing that and get the degrees to do that. That's why we're coming here. We're not coming here to meet the other. We understand that that's part of the experience and will happen. So it's always the combination of having a real interest in it for a real reason, combining that with real values and finding people, and I believe everywhere. I arrived in Montreal. I didn't speak any French. I didn't know. You find people who share those values if you're not afraid to express them yourself. If you try and live them as badly as we all do at it, but if people know that.
Absolutely. to ask you a last question, and then we'll open it for everybody. So
I didn't push the button.
Yeah.
A friend of mine told me I should put up the book.
Yes, I sent you the link of the book with a discount. So go on.
The discount, yeah. I'm fighting with the publisher because it's what's happened with academic presses. They're interested in feeding the libraries, but most people can't afford the price of these books.
Yeah.
So that discount code is for the author, but I'm sharing it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jim. I would like to close with I would say, a difficult question. What do you think about the relationship between the academia and the community work? Why I feel at least, that the academia took part and not really involved what is going on now in the social movement?
I agree with you. And that is my main complaint. Now, if I can find my glasses, I just had them. Give me a second. Here they are. I end the book with an epilogue. And I've kind of excerpted a few minutes from it, which kind of answers your question, but also where I'd like to leave it. So let me read you a little bit from the book.
Yes, please.
Critics will argue that peace today is more elusive than when the program first started, and the gap between those who have and those who do not is wider than ever in each country. Is it just a drop in the bucket? Is it worth it? The same problems remain, and if anything, have worsened. Where's the happy ending? The moral of the story is that there is no final destination in the struggle for social justice. Coexistence work is work in progress. There'll always be struggles to make room at the table and to realize long-term reciprocal interests over short-term self-interest. When I first engaged in civil disobedience in the 1960s for civil rights, I thought that through our demonstrations, everything would change and things would be all right afterwards. 60 years later, it isn't. So there are no happy endings, but points of happiness to celebrate from the heart when they come, and points of frustration and despair managed reciprocally to keep it going, not giving up, being prepared to continue the struggle with an engaged group. That's the moral of the story. Embedded in the relationships that prove possible often under impossible circumstances. It's that relationship that powered the transformation of entire communities as they empowered each one of us. Think of it this way. All this emerged from the leadership of one university. We fashioned a shared identity across borders. We drew strength, and we created opportunities that impacted on more than 1 million people. None of this could have happened without the unflinching and dedicated support of Bernard Shapiro and the late Greta Chambers when they led McGill. Imagine for a moment that every academic institution were required as part of its public mandate and funding to add its drop to the bucket and engage its entire institution with boots on the ground outside the university and in the rough and rocky soil that needs to be plowed, respected, and shared. How many drops might it take to fill rivers of hope and oceans of opportunity? Academic institutions have abandoned their commitment to make education truly universal. They research the world, but don't engage in it enough to improve it for the better. Academia has lost sight of its broad mission to create new knowledge, ideas, and practices because an academic platform is one of the few places which not only permits us to do so, but urges us to do so, to share our privilege, particularly with those who have least access to do it. So, what can we learn from this experience? Well, we can learn from Alhjooj, for example, where I spoke a bit now about the community service center and the volunteer students. Think about what happens there. Ophthalmology students volunteer with people who are blind and teach them to read in Braille. A group of history students interviews them to produce books in Braille about their lived experience. Architecture students design and modify their homes and promote self-sufficiency. Persons with disabilities houses until engineering students showed up and built ramps and roads, renovated dilapidated houses, or students bringing solar energy to remote hillside villages, or students of the Quran empowering women by teaching them their rights in Islam, or children who have lost a parent, and teenagers who lack hope bond with student volunteers and find acceptance, safety, and reassurance, and can dream again. Each of these is among the countless examples where universities quilt the social fabric by connecting the most marginal and alone with young, vibrant students who arrive at their doors with one message: you're part of us, you're important to us, and we're here to help. The same can be said for the work done by Gurion University, by Sapir College. They demonstrate what academic institutions can do when they commit themselves to bring their expertise to the most underserved and marginalized, reach out with respect and reciprocity, and emphasize that the most underserved are as important and merit the same consideration and respect as the most privileged. Young people today are empowering all of us. They are uniting around the core values of universality, reciprocity, and inclusion, and across racial, ethnic, religious divides to promote equality and justice. We're all universities to adopt the principles of Alhjooj. Imagine the impact. And here's a proposal how to do that. First, my proposal is that beginning in the first year of high school and every subsequent year of public education through universities and beyond, that every student be required to do 500 hours of community service. And that community service, the nature of it, be a partnership by the institution, the high school, and the community that they're in. And for each of those hours, each student get the equivalent of $15 an hour of tuition money. The end of 4 years, they have $30,000 worth of tuition money in the bank going into college. And in university, you continue it. That's part of it. Imagine what can happen. Imagine, all the fields, not just social work. Imagine testing the water quality in neighborhoods that have gone bad, like we've done in Amman. Imagine people in the arts creating place for that in communities that don't have access. Historians, I mean, it's incredible what could be done. But for that to happen, then academic institutions have to demand the same of everyone who works there. Every professor, every administrator, every service worker should also be required to give 500 hours, and that be counted, paid for as part of their work. You do that, you change the university. You value service. You hire people who bring that commitment to the university. You reward people, you promote them, not just by publications, which is important, by what they produce with communities and reciprocal partnerships. If we did that, we could turn things around just like we did in the Middle East and in Montreal. But it takes people, Anwar, like you and your generation that's going to push that forward. And now's the time to do it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. I would suggest that you maybe present your plan, your program to the government. Next step. Maybe
Wow.
Well, money. They have money now. So this is especially now we don't have, physically learning. So it's a good opportunity to, bring students to the university and doing things for the community.
I think the demand's got to be made on the university. Let them chase the government for money. It's the universities that got to say, we're not giving back enough in a real way. And that because students can influence their own universities.
Absolutely.
Universities can then influence governments together with the students. That's my
with this we can move to the questions, and I invite everybody to maybe to just raise a hand and share with us thoughts, questions, clarifications, positive things, positive moments with Jim in the Middle East. I see big Jim smiling, so maybe he has something to tell us.
You're muted.
You are muted. We cannot hear you.
Fine, thank you.
Fine.
Well, I guess two things come to mind. One is I've read the book, and it's such a magnificent book, somewhat like this lecture, and that Jim goes through so many aspects of life, dealing with municipalities, having to deal with the army, dealing with helping Bedouin women when the men were away and the women were able to speak more freely. That's how I make the connection to some experience I had with him in the Middle East. And just the fact that change is always happening. It's happening with you or without you. And it's better with you. And Jim is an organizer in his soul, and many of us are organizers here. And we believe in change and we believe in people. And so things can happen. How could somebody do all the things that Jim has done and all the other people? It's impossible, except it's not impossible, it's possible. It just takes belief, takes energy, and it takes this touching of people, because so many, often we are of like minds. We meet someone who thinks they should be respected and you should be respected, and we have like minds. And then get to what was, I think, the topic that Jim was broaching generally, is that all people share the same rights, but that has to be implemented by us acting in that way. So it's been a pleasure to be Jim's friend, and I learned so much from him over the many years. I got to meet Sami Al-Kalani, another person for whom I have such great respect, and whom I've been with in Nablus. And I'll tell you a little, very quick story about the relationship between Jim and Sami. We were in Nablus, and Jim was coming later. And we're in the office in Nablus at the Community Development Center. Excuse me, Sami, if I'm using the wrong name. And all of a sudden, there's a call from Jim, and somehow it got cut off. Jim started to say he's on his way, then he got cut off. And Sami was so upset because he was afraid it was something nefarious. And he was calling everybody. We were going to get into a car and so on and so forth. And then Jim called back to say, oh no, I just had a connection in terms of my phone that went bad. It shows what happens when people touch these others' hearts. They can get inspired to move immediately into action, even in this case, unnecessary action, because he was okay.
Thank you, Jim. Sami, I saw, unmute yourself. Sami, we cannot hear you. Unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
First, thank you for organizing this meeting, and thanks, Jim, for all what you said and for all what you did. I think our experience shows how much it's important to have inspiration by somebody. And we had the potential, and I was doing community work in an improvised way, but with the inspiration of Jim, it was a kind of the trigger that we started a process of professional way based on the principles, values that we respect, and we could build this kind of organization, and it needs to start with genuinity and to believe in the potential there in the community, to believe that participation of people is very important to get that potential from them. And like in physics, Jim likes me to talk about physics and community organizing. This is a chain reaction, but chain reaction never happens without a trigger, without a starting point that you got to a critical mass to start it. And with what we learned from Jim, we could have this critical mass of knowledge with the skills and with shared values to start and did what we could. It's a continuous process. The center is still working after I was retired. So thank you very much, Jim. And I think An-Najah is proud of this experience, and we will be proud of the what Jim wrote in the Epilogue about An-Najah experience. And I'll translate it and send it to the university to have it as a document.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much. Sorel.
Hi, Jim. So you talked about the great work that's done by the Center in Amman and helping those women get their eyes fixed, literacy, forming a seniors center. It's incredible the work they do. It's been recognized by the mayor, by the, I don't know who else you said, but you know, they've received a lot of recognition for the work they do. Does the government help the center in any way?
Well, okay. The kind of social welfare services that we're used to in North America are not fully in place in Jordan. There was no profession of social work in Jordan. Now, really as a result of our work, the University of Jordan, I'm told now, is something like 400 students in its social work program. That's spread to other universities.
That's great.
So, yeah, it's a process, one step along the way. Now, sure, much of the academic programs are sponsored by the university, sponsored by the government. It's a public university, University of Jordan. The services themselves, while Jordan has been moving to advance its services, it has also been absolutely devastated by the continuing influx of refugees, first from Iraq, and I write about that in the book, how 9/11, how the Second Intifada, how the global recession, I show it directly, its greatest impact were on the poorest of the poor in Israel, in Palestine, and in Jordan, in the neighborhoods that we work in, and how. So when Jordan, that now is a population maybe between 9 and 10 million people, when 1 million of those people, at least, are Syrian refugees, and another 1 million or so are Iraqi refugees from not many years before, the country has a real problem in providing infrastructure for the services that are needed. Schools. They're now doing double shifts in schools because they're just not capable. So within that context, the government has developed certain programs, certain plans. Does it have more to go? Yes. I'm not sure I answered your question. Did I?
Kind of.
Yes, kind of.
Their plate is full.
Yeah.
Maybe just a small comment what you said, Jim, that there's no profession of social work. I think you mean the modern, the Western term of social work, because they have different way of, social support and others.
That's right. That's right. Well, what I meant was that there was no university was training people to be social workers.
Absolutely.
And that part. But Islam and Arab countries have a very important, rich tradition around charity, one of the 5 pillars, and social justice.
By the way, I wrote about social work in Palestine historically and the present as an emerging profession in an emerging state. And that was a chapter in a book that came out last year for social work in conflict areas, where also Mirav wrote a chapter about social work in Israel, and I wrote a chapter on social work in Palestine.
Fantastic. We will be inviting you next year. Already we have a potential event.
Both of us,
yes,
me and Mirav.
Yeah. Any question?
And just so, here's the book.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah.
Any question? Any comments?
No, but just if you could give us the information on that book as well in the chat, if possible.
I think it's Sami's book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you tell us a few words about it.
Well, it's the same publisher, Routledge. It's called International Perspectives on Social Work and Political Conflict. Edited by, and the first one is in tribute to Jim Owo, Joe Duffy, Jim Campbell, and Carol, where am I? Carol Tosone, T-O-S-O-N-E.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Maybe, Jim, you want to say, to close, to say a few words?
It's been nice to have a conversation among friends I haven't seen for a long time. I want to thank, first of all, you, Anwar. This was your idea, and you cooked up this whole thing. Took a lot of time and creativity. I want to thank the Blue Met people. And I think the last thing I want to say is that we realize everyone is using this word inflection point about almost everything. but that applies to pushing forward the social justice agenda. I think we truly are at an inflection point. And it's in our hands to help that cause and move these three principles. We all share the same rights, reciprocity and inclusion, wherever we can. And the political context is beginning to help us. Certainly south of the Canadian border.
Anwar,
yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Maybe it was not mentioned that our network had adopted the human rights-based social work and community practice, which I can say all members and all fellows had participated in improving and promoting this approach to social work in our different countries. And in Palestine, I can claim that the term rights-based approach to social work is being used in different occasions following the experience of the Community Service Center at Al-Najah. And it's combining the skills and knowledge of social work with the values and the principles of human rights that both are the same thing, but doing on different aspects of our work. But we are joining both of them together in one approach to social work.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sami. Thank you very much. I think it's...
I'm Evie, Jim's cousin. Just
Evie.
Hello. So what I would just want to say is, as one of the two people on this call who really knew Jim's mother, what enormous pride and satisfaction she'd have in this call. It's just, that's it. There's a principle that it's not on you to finish the work, it's on you to start the work and go as far as you can go. And certainly Jimmy's done that. So
thank you very much. Thank you, Evie. Thank you very much. I think I mentioned before that I was also Jim's student at the master at the McGill University, and I talk a lot. And when I start at Montreal City Mission, I have to mention now here my colleague, my boss, Paula Klein, and my colleague also, Arwa Yunus, and I would like to thank them for supporting me in this event and in other events. We created our project called Man Ensemble, because man means in Arabic together. And as you mentioned, Jim, before, if you bring people to common issues, to believe that they have really the same rights, you can make a change. We faced these challenges at the beginning of our work within the MAN program. We tried to bring together new families, newcomers, refugees with Canadian born, because if the refugees will feel sense of belonging, that Montreal, this is their place. They are not just refugees and they are not visiting here. This is gonna be their place, their future children's place. They will make it better. And believe me, all refugees who did it and came here, they are very, very strong people. Who didn't, the weak people, they stayed there. They couldn't do it. Who did it, he has many positive energy to bring back to the community, to contribute to the community. And I think we see it within our Camp Cosmos, with our Green Sage model, with the women weaving their dreams, with the mask project last year. When the pandemic just started, we still have actually a group of women, a sewing circle, to come, to learn, to support each other. And when the pandemic came, everybody was, confused. We didn't know what to do. And they raised their hand. Guys, bring us the sewing machine at home. We want to produce masks for all the communities. and they did more than 2,000 masks. We distribute them for frontline organization and low-income families. Those that's just came 1 year, 2 years. We need just to give them this sense of belonging, to share with them, to give them the opportunity to really to contribute back. I would like really to thank you, Jim, to thank everybody. It was a pleasure. And always when I speak with you, Jim, I learn new things. And as I did today, it was a pleasure to have everybody here. And I hope maybe the next year, the next event, we will be seeing each other physically, and we will have food from the women WWD, and all the best for everybody. Thank you very much.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you, Anwar. Thank you, Arwa.
Thank you, Anwar.
All the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Jim. Keep well.
Yeah, great to see you.
Likewise.
What do I do?
Oh, I think I can go out of here.
I'm not disconnected. I will leave you if you want to speak, so feel free. Just
Yes.
Jim Kabir, hope to see you soon. if things get better. I like to be in Montreal and see you all.
Where are you, Sammy?
I am in Mississauga now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I came, and because of the pandemic, I couldn't go back. And here is my daughter and my son, and I'm retired now, so I'm staying here.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
okay.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So what am I? Ma Codessa.